Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and today we got some DeepSeek drama to be talking about. You know, nothing gets me excited like talking about billion-dollar companies, especially companies that are shaking the world right now. So for anybody that doesn't remember DeepSeek, I made a video about it on a couple days ago, and I was basically going over how China effectively made an artificial intelligence competitor to ChatGPT 07, or not 07, it's 01, sorry. I'm thinking, I have emotes in my head right now because I looked at another thing just before I filmed this. But the understanding of this is that China made an open source competitor and it actually shook the world entirely. Now, in the last video, I talked about DeepSeek. I actually ran a diluted version of DeepSeek R1 on my local device. Now, what's funny about China's AI is you can actually download DeepSeek v3 because it's open source, or at least rather the weights are actually open source, which should allow people to reverse engineer it. And I saw something interesting. Apparently, by daisy chaining a couple of M-series Macs, you were actually able to run DeepSeek, the actual big model, on devices that were not powered by Nvidia GPUs, which is a pretty huge thing because it really shows that China isn't just out to make AIs open source, but it's also allowing people to use artificial intelligences on things that are pretty much platform agnostic, which is, by the way, a good thing, okay? So to give you an idea about it, DeepSeek came out, and in the time that DeepSeek also released, a couple days ago, another company in China jumped in and produced an actual rival to DeepSeek. So for anybody that doesn't know, this is Qwen 2.5 Max, coming out of the big brains at Alibaba Cloud, okay? Alibaba, the same site you go to buy stuff that you probably couldn't find on Temu or even Amazon. These guys, like Amazon of China, effectively have their own big tech company inside them, Alibaba Cloud. So these guys produced Qwen 2.5, another open source model that you can download and play with right now. And we're going to look at some of these models together, don't worry. So this one allows, again, following the MOE model that DeepSeek had, and they basically claim that they are stronger than DeepSeek v3 and Llama, which is actually Meta's or Facebook's like open source AI. Yeah, all of a sudden in the last couple days, the biggest threat to any of these guys is actually OpenAI. You know, the company that pretty much was like the premier de facto head of artificial intelligence. Well, they magically just had a shit ton of competition kick up, and the competition comes at it from an open source perspective. Now, again, for me, I don't really care who wins the AI war, whether it be China or the United States. At the end of the day, this is kind of like the big space race that your parents or maybe your grandparents or great-grandparents, depending on how young or old you are watching this video, yeah, they got to see when the United States and the Soviet Union were going at each other's throats to send shit to space. Well, now the race is all about who's got the best artificial intelligence, and it's gotten to a point where we're at each other's actual throats. So again, to go to Qwen 2.5 Max, you can actually play with it right now. They actually have it completely available with Qwen Chat. And to show you how open source is important to China, if you actually go and register for an account here, you'll know that even their UI is powered by OpenWeb UI, which is the same shit I use to run their AIs locally on my own servers. So crazy shit to see. Now, this allows you to make, image generation, video generation, web searches, artifacts, even write code, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, if I type in anything, I need to actually make an account. And you can log in with Google or your GitHub account. I'm not going to do it because, like I said, I generally don't like to sign up for these services because I do care about my privacy, which is something we are going to look at, of course, as we go through this video. So anyways, yeah, they managed to have competition kick up from China itself. So there's actually a lot of Chinese companies that have jumped into this bandwagon. Now again, to show you the amount of open source stuff, if you go to Qwen 2.5, you'll find out, yeah, they allow you and pretty much tell you you can run this stuff very much locally on your system. So if you go to a website known as Hugging Face, you'll find out Qwen, alongside other AI models, allow you to effectively download these models and play around with them on your system. So if you use applications like LM Studio, like I have, and I've shown this in the past, but generally speaking, if you want to play around with artificial intelligences, you can basically open up a tool known as LM Studio, like I have here. You can click on this little search feature and basically download any of these models and play around with them. Again, you probably want to download the models that you have the ability to run, depending on what hardware you have in your system. If you have like a 4090 GPU like I do, you can run some pretty heavy models. But even on my MacBook back over here, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to run some smaller models, something in the tier of 7 billion parameters, like these two, for instance, that system absolutely shreds through it with no problem. So again, I wanted to show you some of these models here. For instance, running, again, I have 5 of them downloaded. I have something known as Lava, which allows you to actually throw images into the actual AI, so it can actually examine images on your system. So for instance, with Lava, I showed it an image of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as a screenshot. Now, running entirely locally, the AI told me the image shows a group of people standing on the deck of a boat enjoying their time together. There are 3 individuals in the scene, with one person located near the left side of the boat and 2 others closer to the right side. The boat appears to be floating on water. So it didn't really exactly get the image right perfectly over here, but I also didn't expect it to. One thing I did ask, is the image real or is it from a video game? And the actual AI said, yeah, it's from a video game, as evidenced by the present boat and people on it that are not typically found in real life scenarios. So I assume the AI took one look at Cloud and the big ass fucking sword on his back and thought, yeah, that doesn't seem pretty kosher. Not the fact that Junon's big ass cannon is aimed right across the ocean at the other side of the world. I don't think it even picked up on it. But then again, I went down even further and ran other models. So for instance, even running a model like Qwen, for instance, Qwen 2.5, and this is not the max model, this is something I ran here, and even when I asked it, hey, can you write things like code for me? So I asked it to write me things like Tetris and Rust, and unfortunately this code didn't necessarily work too well, but I did ask it to write me a random joke application. And some of the code does work. For instance, this joke application, if we just throw it into a Rust compiler online, for instance, on Rust Playground, if I decide to drop in this code right here, hit that big old run button, it will actually run, with some warnings of course, and generate me random jokes. So if I run it again, it'll change the jokes hopefully. Yeah, why do programmers always mix up Christmas, Halloween? Because October 30, fuck off. God damn. But yeah, this is just an example of code being written. Now, obviously, there are companies like Facebook that one day will say, all the programmers, at least the junior ones I imagine, are going to be replaced entirely by artificial intelligence. And I want to say that if you're somebody who wants to be a programmer, or you're somebody getting into it, probably shouldn't be using AI tools just because there's going to be a lot of auditing and code review, and if you don't know how to review this code in the first place, you're never actually going to be the programmer you want to be, okay? But that's, again, beyond the point. Running things like DeepSeek AI locally on my system, again, it will think and provide you cool stuff like mathematical proofs. Now, I noticed that there were comments in my last video about, Muda, I'm not running no Chinese software on my system like this. Well, I hate to break it to you, you probably are running some Chinese software on your system, but even going beyond some of that xenophobia, if you're worried about the fact that the Chinese are reading into your inputs, like I said, LM Studio and a lot of these local AIs are totally fine for privacy. They're not ever calling back home as far as my knowledge goes. So instead of connecting to DeepSeek's interface on the web, which I wouldn't, I don't trust it, just like I don't trust OpenAI. I actually looked at the privacy policies for both of these services in my last video regarding this topic, and yes, both DeepSeek and OpenAI, well, fuck, any model, reads into your private information and collects data you probably don't want to share with it. But if you run their models locally, then realistically, no data is leaving your system, okay? And ultimately, no matter what nationality your AI has, as long as it's running locally, everything should be pretty much halal at this point. And that's really what you should be going at. I'm not against artificial intelligence services, but I do prioritize for your privacy and security, run them locally, okay? You can even run some of these lower models on like Android smartphones if you wanted to. Now, because of the actual massive rise of some of these services, apparently countries have already started blocking DeepSeek in places. So for instance, in Italy, apparently DeepSeek's blocked on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And it has a lot of relation with the data protection authorities in their countries, okay? Which again, Europe's a little bit more serious on this than the United States or even Canada. But even in the United States, there's some politicians that have brought up the idea, like for instance, one of these representatives from Michigan, John Molinar, goes, "The United States cannot allow Chinese Communist Party models such as DeepSeek to risk our national security and leverage our technology to advance their AI ambitions." You are actually witnessing a fucking Cold War right now. In the world as we speak, okay? We have got governments pissing and shitting themselves, stopping each other from advancing the AI threat. And even the Trump administration is kind of talking about tightening some of those Nvidia China exports. Now, if you don't know anything about Nvidia in China, basically when it comes to exporting GPUs specifically for this kind of stuff, there is actually an export restriction. Enough to the point that China, for a brief period of time, ladies and gentlemen, received a specifically different model of an Nvidia GPU, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. One of those GPUs was the Nvidia H800. Now, this was a modified version of an Nvidia H100, and the key difference was a reduced chip-to-chip data transfer rate. Now, from what I understand, this was actually reversed, and these chips effectively just became H100s, effectively causing the US government to just go, yeah, just ban it all, okay? We don't want China getting any of this good technology that we have, okay? That premium silicon is our silicon, simple as that. So we've literally got the government jumping into the free market and telling Nvidia what they can and cannot do. So yeah, it's not good for Nvidia to have the government decide who they can and cannot sell to. At the end of the day, Nvidia is the one company where they're basically selling shovels to all the AI companies, okay? They're getting rich, fat fucking rich off of the AI race, all right? Because they're just selling the hardware. Now, obviously, this has come from like people looking into, again, DeepSeek and wondering, hey, where do they actually get these crazy GPUs to train off of? And there's been some allegations, like one of the CEOs from a company known as Scale AI was basically saying that they had like 50,000 of these H100s. And I don't know what evidence that actually ended up coming out of. Like there wasn't really any proof about it. Only that apparently the Chinese can't talk about it because it's against the export controls the US has put into place. They have more chips than other people expect. And again, I don't doubt that they probably obtain chips illegally. We just need more evidence to work off of. But again, even if this export shit is true, the reality of it is that in some cases, apparently it came out that they were running the inference side of this on their own chips that they made, specifically the Huawei 910C, which I believe is like an equivalent to the Nvidia H series stuff. So even if you're banning the Chinese from using it, they're just going to use their own big-ass companies like Huawei to make their own stuff, all right? And this is where we get into a world where, again, competition will be bred no matter what. I know that I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but there's so much advancements that have happened in this field in just a matter of 1 week that trying to explain all of it is almost impossible, you know? Now, if you look at Nvidia's stock from the day that I showed you it dipped, it did kind of rebound, but it's almost tumultuous for Nvidia because they're in a weird spot where people are kind of wondering, do we need to spend like tons of money on the most upgraded Nvidia AI stuff when China apparently claims to have made deepfake in like just a few millions of dollars? That's a serious question and like the biggest puzzle on like everyone's mind in this field. There's a lot of people that have said things like, oh, DeepSeek is actually censoring, like this Chinese AI censor stuff. And yes, DeepSeek is a censor-filled AI. For instance, if you ask DeepSeek about Tiananmen Square in the 80s, it'll probably tell you, I can't really talk about it. It's not within my parameters. Yes, there is censorship in this application. But to be fair, there's also censorship in OpenAI. For instance, in this footage that I'm showing you, I could ask OpenAI about Diddy's like sexual assault allegations, and it'll just spit out all the information it finds on the web. Now, conveniently, if I ask OpenAI about Sam Altman and Annie Altman's like actual sexual assault allegation lawsuit that's apparently been floating around, suddenly OpenAI will start spitting information at me and then also just say, this goes against our terms and services. So at one point, it's okay for me to look up and see Diddy's sexual assault allegations, but then I can't look up Sam Altman's, the CEO of OpenAI. Look, I get why Sam would want to censor this information, if so, but this is where, again, I don't get the censorship stuff, all right? At the end of the day, no matter where you go to, you're just going to get a different type of propaganda from whichever country's AI you jump into. And then when you get like CEOs and, again, the leadership who are just putting in what they want and what they don't want people to see, you can't sell me on the fact that China is bad because of censorship. Because I'm sorry, the censorship exists everywhere. And we have to be honest with ourselves. It's one of the reasons why I promote local AI stuff. You can download models like Dolphin or even uncensored versions of DeepSeek now. Because it's open source, people have modified the parameters and just actually use these AIs uncensored, meaning that for good or bad, you can use these AIs for nefarious purposes or altruistic purposes. Again, I am totally okay with uncensored stuff because I think, again, extreme example here, much like a firearm, so to speak, a firearm can be used for, again, positive purposes. It can be used for negative purposes. It is a tool at the end of the day. Behind the firearm is a total human being, somebody who has the decisions for good and bad. And that's what I kind of look at with computer software as well, too. It can be a loaded gun, all right? But again, I wouldn't put so much blame on the tool as I would on the human being using it, okay? But again, that's just my perspective. Feel free to agree or disagree. Let me know in the comment section below. But again, this is one thing where obviously when it comes to artificial intelligences like this, I promote uncensored stuff. Obviously, you should be using things like Dolphin or really anything that doesn't treat you like a child or overly put too many guardrails onto it. And obviously, I don't promote anything illegal being done with those uncensored AIs. I'm just saying if this is the future where we're going to be using this stuff to search for stuff or, provide us with information, I want the facts. I don't want something curtailed to me by a specific government or somebody who has their ideologies in front of the actual truth. But one of the things that OpenAI has made me laugh about is apparently they have evidence, quote unquote, that DeepSeek actually stole from them. The same company, OpenAI, that has all of these fucking lawsuits, a lot of them centered around things like copyright infringement, currently ongoing, by the way, where apparently they've been sued by places like the Authors Guild for, again, basically busting copyright. According to this one lawsuit, what they've effectively said is defendant fed plaintiffs' copyrighted works into the large language models, or LLMs, algorithm designed to output human-seeming text responses to users' prompt and queries. These algorithms are the heart of the defendant's massive commercial enterprise. And yes, OpenAI is big business. So if they are alleged to be taking information and software and copyrighted materials from somebody's actual copyrighted works, they should be fucking stopped, or they should at least pay and license that stuff fairly. So plaintiff seeks to represent professional fiction writers whose work springs from their own minds and creative literary expression. And again, these people, their livelihood depends on the works that they've created. If OpenAI is going to jump in and illegally, allegedly steal their material, they should fairly compensate people. But I suspect no company like OpenAI actually wants to do it, because that would be a serious financial blow to them, actually paying for the information they allegedly scrape off of the internet. Yeah, crazy shit. So, according to the fucking dipshits at OpenAI, Sam Altman, for instance, who believes that I guess they can just scrape whatever they want off the internet and use their AIs to regurgitate basically human internet traffic and flood the internet with AI slop, effectively killing the last-free bastion of human freedom. Yeah, that douchebag suddenly thinks that, yes, DeepSeek is bad because what they're quote-unquote doing is distilling the model. So what does distilling the model mean? Basically, what this means is imagine if OpenAI is your big brother. Well, at some point, you, the smaller brother, who is DeepSeek, will ask Big Brother like a million questions. Now, these million questions may seem harmless at first, but what Little Bro is doing is basically getting Big Bro to spill his information, his guts, his knowledge, so that Little Bro ends up being same level bro. And maybe, just maybe, Little Bro becomes Big Bro by process of distillation. So this is kind of like, imagine if OpenAI put in all this work to train their model. Well, what the actual DeepSeek or any of these Chinese models are alleged to do is basically ask and basically distill the information out of OpenAI so they become a OpenAI-like competitor. Now, obviously, one could say that this is stealing, this is, copyright infringement in a way too, but I really don't have any sympathy from Sam Altman or somebody who names his company OpenAI, yet they are as close source as Microsoft or Apple or any instance, system. Now, again, I'm not a Chinese supporter or simp or anything, just because I think that DeepSeek is good because of actual open source usage. The Chinese government has problems with privacy and security, as does the US government. This is not a which side is better. I will say DeepSeek and a lot of these tools, in my opinion, are better because of the open source, the attribution attached. It allows people to actually play around with these models, fork them, and make them better. It's much like Linux in the sense that because these models are open source, because Linux, for example, is an open source kernel, it allows that piece of software to not necessarily even exist in one place. China, if they open source the weights for something like DeepSeek, allows everyone in the world to effectively own DeepSeek. It allows us all to fork their project, just like Linux can be forked, modified, and then reintegrated down the road by millions, if not billions of people around the world. It makes a project that typically would be locked down in one corporation basically become property of the entire world. And through that, the amount of advancements that can occur is going to be lightning fast, and at one point, it should beat out OpenAI. Look, in much cases, Microsoft is huge when it comes to people's desktop operating systems, but let's not ignore the fact that when it comes to servers and when it comes to all these big corporations and the people like me who use Linux on a day-to-day basis, everyone benefits when we all work together. As opposed to, again, one company just leading one project for strict financial gain. But yeah, OpenAI, it's a bad day to be them. And in one way, it's also kind of a bad day to be Nvidia, but that's mostly because the government is jumping in. Look, China has done something pretty sweet, in my opinion, at least these Chinese companies. They've released an AI competitor in a world where it used to pretty much be one closed source person leading it. So hopefully this kind of forces, OpenAI, probably not, or a lot of these American companies to also open source their projects, especially when it comes to things like AI. There is one American company that is following that suit, obviously Facebook with Llama. But yeah, open source, great stuff to see, and it's probably the only big reason that I'm actually optimistic about something like DeepSeek or even Qwen. I love open source. I love seeing this information be freely shared, freely forked, and freely manipulated, and freely expanded on by the citizens of the world versus just shadowy corporate interests. Now look, I'm going to end this video off. Obviously, I do want to follow up more on AI. When it comes to companies like OpenAI, we're obviously going to be looking at the whistleblower situation next. The mysterious suicide of one whistleblower that had a lot of things to say about OpenAI is something we're going to be looking at down the road. But for now, I'm going to end this video off with, again, the real finale. There's been a lot of massive controversies and drama surrounding DeepSeek, and it was worth really kind of following up on this and discussing this topic. But yeah, I want to know ultimately what you guys think about it in the comment section below. Like, what do you guys think about DeepSeek as a product? What do you guys think about the rise of Chinese open source AIs? Because look, we can't turn off the AI genie, okay? Now that every country's on it, now that every country's wanting to one-up each other, it's not going to be something that goes away. And ultimately, I think the best case scenario out of this is a lot of the biggest models in the world and a lot of these big projects in AI Hopefully, the most popular ones are going to be the ones that are open sourced, ones that are intended to run locally, and ones that we have a clear, transparent understanding of how they truly operate. But ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.